daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott, and as always today, joined by my good friend and wonderful co-host, Zach Finch. How you doing, bud? You right?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. It's just midweek, isn't it? It's midweek. Wait, it's Monday. Where are we at? Who knows?
Tuesday. It is Tuesday's episode today, my friend, and that shows
that shows you how well I'm doing, mate.
Look, it's because we're in that liminal space of the international break, right? It's like the Crimbo Limbo, but worse, because there's no joy of Christmas to carry us through. There's no sports. We don't know what day it is. We just know there's no football. But it's all right, mate. It's eking ever closer. Don't worry.
I'm glad this is our last international break for a while, because it just throws me off all sorts.
It does.
It
throws our
routine out. My routine, mate. Let's not read too much into that.
We need Saturday, we need Tuesday, we need Saturday, we need 3 games all the time, all the football all the time. It never ends. That's what we're getting back to soon. But speaking of it never ending, I thought today we would have a chat and think about a problem that we're coming up against more and more as time progresses, right? And that's why are all of our players getting injured? And why specifically hamstrings? And so I went away and I did some digging, and I've got some stuff. Now, I guess I'll throw the big caveat in at the start. It might shock you all, especially our viewers on YouTube who can sit and look at me to know that I am not an expert in physical exercise or sports science. That is not something I have ever been known to be an expert in, but I have done some research for this episode. So, it comes from a place of some knowledge, if not a lot. But look, I know how to rehab muscles. I've done plenty of that.
To be clear, mate, I'm not an expert on ruling kingdoms, and I'm also not an expert on World War II or participating in battles in World War II. But I can tell you a lot about it. Knowledge and experience are 2 very different things. So
that's it.
I think that you don't necessarily have to live up to the things to be qualified to speak about something. Plus you are doing the caveat, which is a lot better than a lot of people nowadays.
I had to throw it out there because look, I know that it's going to be some stuff that people are going to say, but at the end of the day, it's something that we're seeing more and more often, right? And not just as Saints fans, just in football in general. There seems to be a huge amount of injuries constantly, all the time, right? We see every team at some point in the season is in some form of injury crisis. Now, we can start with the obvious points and get them out of the way, right? There's more football now than ever before. Right? There are more games, they come faster, there's less recovery time, and that has an impact for sure. You look at players like Shea Charles, who wasn't supposed to play 3 games in a week for us, though, in that 7-day period, but then, Flynn Downs went out with illness or with a knock, and all of a sudden that is, 270 minutes of high intensity, high impact football in a really short period of time, and your body just can't quite recover from that, can it? It's not long enough to let your muscles do their thing and heal, especially with the intensity that the game is at the moment, right? Because we talk a lot about the step up between different leagues or between youth football and senior football. So clearly the physical demand is that much higher now than it has been for a long time. I guess a lot of that's down to the sports science and stuff, right? Because there's more out there about how you preload or energy or, set up yourself up right. They have all of these plans and again, I don't claim to be an expert, but I'm pretty sure there's some level of routine of I need to put this amount of food in my body at this time, and then this after the warm up we take this energy gel shot, or like when you see in some of the podcasts that sort of former pros do, where they like break down their like pre-match routine, and it's as a normal person looking in, it's insane. It's not some sort of like routine that you would ever contemplate. Like the amount of planning that goes into each game is crazy, right? And so because the intensity is pushed up by that, I mean, I guess it's also heading and causing the physical demands that are causing the issues on the body, right?
Like, yeah, this is the thing. I think you can prepare, you can do all of this kind of stuff, and that's not necessarily always going to stop an injury because of the sheer amount that's played, right? People, there have been people that have had tendencies to have issues that then reoccur. Our squad's a perfect example. Ross Stewart, right, is somebody that has been injury prone the entire time he's been with us. That doesn't mean that he didn't get to a state where he was extremely fit at the beginning of the season. Sulemana, it was revealed, was carrying a long-term injury that constantly would reoccur when we signed him. And looking to what I even mentioned yesterday with Armando Broja, right? Like ever since he did his ankle a long time ago, it's been really, really difficult for him to recover. And you will have some players that are just lucky and never seem to pick up injuries and seem to just be constantly fit. James Ward-Prowse, another example. He was playing right back when all of our right backs were injured and proceeded to play nearly every game that he was available for us, right? But for other players, that's not necessarily the case. And you are going to have, sure, like different personalized plans and bits and pieces, but there is going to be a element of biological luck to it. And there is also going to be an element of, I managed to avoid getting my ankle completely clattered at 17. So because of that, I've never had to worry about that reoccurring. And on top of that, you talk about all these pre-match routines and don't get me wrong, but also, footballers' private lives can be a bit more private nowadays. They seem to be anyway. But there are also, examples of, guys going out clubbing a day before the game and shove a load of alcohol in their body. So yeah, what's said on one hand is, oh, this is what we have to do in prep. But on the other hand, that isn't necessarily always the case. And I don't mean that into undermine all of the fitness stuff that's put into place. I mean that isn't to say, well, sometimes people will do that and things still won't happen, right? Like you look at back in the day, sort of the days of Matt Latiz and, having like a McMuffin and while you're hungover and going on and banging in a couple of goals. It is a very, very different sport now.
You just can't do it. You wouldn't be able to rock up and do it
because of the sheer amount of football that takes place.
It's it's crazy. And I guess to finish off on some of the more obvious sort of factors that go before I get into some of the maybe slightly more not thought about stuff is the travel demands, right? Like I think all but one of our 3 games in 7-day periods, these sort of 3-day Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday groups, all but one of them have involved 2 away games this season, which is, regardless of how you I think for one of them we stayed up in a certain place, but even that in itself, you're not in your home environment or you're not in like Staplewood to be able to rest and recover properly. So you're in these sort of unusual surroundings potentially, or either that or you're going to have to fly or sit on a bus for an extended period of time. And like when the gap is so, like these things that we talk about with the routines are set in place to eke like the last top percent of the ability and the physical power out of these players. You throw things like that into the mix and none of that's gonna like combine particularly well to do well. You can't rest properly on a bus. Like it's just not doable, is it?
Well, yeah, for sure. And there's also, you've got other examples, right, of like the international amount of international travel that needs to be take place, especially with these international breaks. If you're lucky, you get to play sort of at home or near to as home as possible. But I like jump back to that story about when Joe Aribo was in the international squad and they got stuck in like a bus station in Liberia for like 17, 18 hours. I can't remember who it was, like who was doing the like live streams of like, guys, we're just in this bus station in Libya, no one's picking us up. This is actually insane. And you should point out, like, can you rest properly? No, not really. Like, does anyone think of catching a flight as a restful experience? Like, even people doing business like every day, that the reason that you like those sort of stories when you've got like that guy who, instead of living in like a university, would fly to Amsterdam and then to London every morning because it was cheaper than getting the train. Like, you're like, the reason that's such a crazy story is because no one else would do that, because that isn't something that would be like a restful or fun experience. So
yeah, it's crazy. And like on top of all of that, right? You know, think about how we talk about like these short turnarounds to games and the lack of recovery time. If you sort of think Saturday into Tuesday is like a 72-hour turnaround, if you're adding 10 to 12 hours of preparation or travel into that mix, it's a disaster, right? Like, even if you're traveling from, Bristol to Southampton, but then you have to travel from Southampton up to Blackburn, there's no way that can be good for people. That you need to think about that on top of the additional fixture congestion that comes in, right? That's not a non-entity. But
yeah,
that's
to be clear with that as well, like there'll be arguments, and there's always arguments, and we've made the arguments of, I'll do that for, if I'm getting paid that much money a week, I'd crack on with it. But what we're talking about here is things that end up then physically causing injuries, and like tiredness, slipping, and then accidentally like getting yourself put out for a long term that could then have a long term injury that could be affected by travel. It's not saying, they should just shut up and get on with it, because like, you can have that opinion if you want, but our argument here is that is probably gonna cause injuries more, right? Like that's just the human body is weaker because it is lacking sleep, etc. It's gonna tend to break easier.
Yeah, indeed. Right, mate, before we get into some of the finer points and maybe some of the less thought about ones, let's have a little break and hear a message from our partners at Bioniq.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements, designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
Okay, mate, and we are back. So, to move into some of the like finer details, and now we're getting into like the real like sports science and medical stuff that may or may not have an impact. And I guess what I'll do is I'll go through them and maybe we'll think about how that may or may not apply to us. But the top one is, or the top two really, are very linked. And this is load mismanagement or training intensity versus match intensity and the gap. So where clubs rely heavily on data, but may be forced to play overworked players due to the squad depth or tactical needs, like we were talking about earlier with Shea Charles, and the fact that players spend more time maintaining fitness and training because the next game requires peak physical condition, which means they actually end up with less time resting. So if you think about how, your muscle, especially as it's different with all different people, your muscles, if they're not getting the right amount of time to rest before you start pushing them again, you could be, forcing them towards breaking point as opposed to sort of letting them allow for the time. Whereas, I'm sure they have a very rigid schedule of like, we do a recovery day and then we do light training, then we do heavy training. I don't know, the exact details, but maybe some of the players need more than one recovery day, right? Like that's just a thing. And if you're immediately then pushing on to be ready for the next game, that overuse is going to become more and more of a factor. And I guess that one really applies quite heavily to us, right? Because there are several players in our team who you want to see play every minute, right? Like there are players we can't do without.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems we've got, right? That's like when we talk about last season, the championship season before, how vital Flynn Downs was. So when he kept going off ill, that became a huge problem for us. You know, Ross Stewart starts doing well, starts scoring. We play him 3 games in a week. That is it's literally just an example that is perfectly placed for this conversation, right? Like 3 games, probably overdid it. We'd have liked to have seen him start every game after he started actually putting them away. And then that's it. And now he's in that problem. And then another example of last season was when Aaron Ramsdale broke his hand. And then we ended up having to switch between goalkeepers. And then Lex McCarthy got injured. Bazuna was away. We were playing Joe Lumley. You know, I genuinely think that the downfall of Russell Martin was well into its descendancy, right? At that point. However, considering how much time Sports Republic had given him, I genuinely think that if we'd had Ramsdale between the sticks, if, you know, the Chelsea game and the Tottenham game weren't 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, whatever, I think they were both 5 or 5-1, 5-0. I think that, you know, if they'd been 1-0 defeats, they might have persisted with him a little longer. So realistically, you're talking about what could be small injuries that end up becoming bigger injuries that end up essentially costing some managers their job, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And the last point on medical science I've got on this bullet point list from these articles I've pulled is long-term overuse. There's theory that years of elite level play from a younger age, as we're seeing players start younger and younger, is probably causing accumulated stress on joints and muscles, which means that their longevity as a player just isn't existent. Like they're going to get to an age where it's not feasible to play this much football that much anymore, purely because of how young they started.
The thing is with that argument is it's just logical, right? Like you look at the sort of Wayne Rooney's of the world and the fact that they retire early because they cannot continue to play at an elite level.
Okay.
No, I as I said, I agree with you, mate, on that kind of stuff because again, like child bodybuilders are a perfect example, right? So they start off when they're young, they get absolutely jacked, they turn 18, and then they kind of do worse than some of the peers that then overtake them because they've got significantly older injuries and older stuff to deal with, right? That's I guess another example, but we are already seeing it. Like Lamine Yamal, right? He's about to have surgery, and he was a breakthrough like wonder kid, and now you've got the fact that like, do you think he's going to have the longevity of like Cristiano Ronaldo?
Yeah, well, you probably think about how complex we've already been talking about, right, with players and their routines and their muscles and the strength and whether they're having the repetition the right repetition, the right recovery. Then throw into the mix the fact that amongst that also that is a person who is still growing. Like that is such an additional layer of complexity that how can you factor that in from a scientific standpoint? Because it's not like it's uniform. It's not like you grow a set amount each day until you reach your maximum height. That's just not how it works, is it? Like
it's also the thing that really bothers me about when it's like, oh, they're young, they should just get on with it and deal with it. That's what they can, you know, when you're young, you don't get burnt out. You don't. I'm like, no, but you need to allow, like, there's a reason that we don't really talk about growing pains, but people feel them when they're younger, right? Like that's the thing that I struggled massively with when I was younger. I know other people have. It's not like, I don't think there's a proper scientific basis for it, but like, it's a huge point that you've kept emphasizing, Greg, that I think people forget. Just like they're still growing, they're still literally children at this point.
Yeah.
Like, you can't like they are not fully formed in their body, and you're expecting their body to do things that it puts a huge strain on them whilst they are also trying to grow. And it can't be emphasized enough as to how much of an impact that can have. And you can put all the science and the data and you want behind it. That's fine. Maybe we'll get to a point where we fix that problem entirely. But that field is also a field that is consistently changing. As we pointed out, like imagine trying to explain to a footballer in the 80s, imagine having a chat with your dad when you're a kid, Greg, and be like, when all these footballers are older, Dad, they're all going to like drink this weird gel and then run out like a headless chicken for like and that's 60 minutes. It was just what? Because that's how nutritional science, like all that kind of science, has changed since that time, and it still has the ability to change going forward as well.
Yeah. It's mad how it's all progressing and pushing to these like higher heights, and it's what makes the game so enjoyable to watch. But I mean, it comes at the cost that this is sort of becoming more of an issue. Right, I have I think 3 more points and 2 counterpoints, which are nice conclusion-based stuff. But first, let's have a little break and hear a message from our partners at Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr. All right, mate, and we are back. I've got one more point on fixtures, without meaning to drill the point home. A slightly more in-depth thought about specifically routines and stuff, is the times that games are played and moved for broadcast reasons, and the impact that might have on things like circadian rhythms, which is, nice sciencey word, but, just, your body doing things at the right time. And this makes even more sense, right, when we're talking about, like, pre-match routines. Like, if you're preparing for a 3 o'clock kickoff, and that means you have to have a big bowl of pasta to preload your energy front at midday, that means if you've got to have a 12:30 kickoff, are you doing the same thing and, like, stuffing your face with a bowl of pasta at 9 o'clock in the morning? Because I love food, and that sounds awful to me. Like...
Yeah, that's definitely, like, again, and that also to the travel, and if you're traveling between different time zones, all that can kind of have an effect. Like, there's nothing. Sleep's so important. I don't think we underestimate it as people. Like, I'm really bad for that, and I know if I have slept poorly. And you're right, and part of that is also to do with, like, for example, my wife really struggled to get to sleep the other day, and I realised it's because she came home from she'd attended a lecture. She came home quite late, and then she had a cake thing that I'd bought from our local coffee shop that stays open quite late. And obviously didn't think of the two. Oh, okay. Well, I've just had a bunch of sugar that's gone into my body, and that has now kept me awake for 2 or 3 hours. So all of that stuff needs to be thought about, planned, especially if you're going in to then expend a bunch of energy. But I'm sure that playing at 12:30 and playing at 8 p.m. at night are two different experiences.
Vastly different experiences. It's crazy. And without meaning to encroach on maybe something that I'm in the middle of preparing for tomorrow's episode, maybe the vast difference in kickoff times and the preparation that would vary and go into that might even have an effect on, say, form at different times of the day or week. I'll leave that one open to interpretation for now, and maybe we'll touch on that tomorrow. But yeah, it's not something to ignore, right? Because if you can't, it's mental preparation and physical preparation in a completely different. You're right. A midday kickoff and an 8 p.m. kickoff are like literal different ends of the day. Like, crazy to have to prepare yourself for.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's like, oh, they should just, this is their job, they should just get on with it and do that. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I know how to do my job, and I could do them at 2 different times of the day. And I have sometimes had to do them at 2 different types of the day because of the nature of what we do. But that doesn't mean that, like, I know for a fact that I'm going to be in a different mind state at like 9 p.m. And even with this podcast, everyone knows that whenever we do a late night recording, it gets a bit just, I don't know, more chaotic. Yeah, like, I guess that's the word. And so the idea of just being like, wow, they should just get on with it, and that's not going to have an effect. And that's not going to have an effect on injuries and the tiredness and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, of course it is. That's just science.
Yeah, it's crazy. And once you add in all of this together, I mean, it all starts to make sense as to why it's becoming more and more common. And so we've touched upon mental fatigue and the effect that will have. And so now let's come on to my last 2 points, and both of them are kind of environmental factors. Now, pitches, right, are obviously of a much higher quality these days than years gone by in most parts of the country. Sorry, Blackburn. But but most of these pitches are hybrid pitches, right? So they're sort of half grass, half astroturf, which is, in its own way complex. And I'm sure that there are issues with edge cases, like the way studs interact with this turf, right? And certain footwear. And that's all things that I'm sure people think about when they come into play. But actually, because they are artificial and therefore in general drier and less spongy, we see that even when it's raining, they have to water the pitch with sprinklers at half time and before the game, regardless, to keep the ball ping on the way, because it's drier, so firmer. That in itself is going to contribute to joint and muscle stress, right? Because it's harder ground, so there's more impact just from running, especially when you're running, the large distances that is covered with the modern game, and how, playing in the centre of midfield or in a wing back running up and down the pitch, you're probably doing half a marathon at least across 90 minutes. So to be doing that on such a hard surface, that's in itself going to impact it, right? So another thing worth thinking about. And the last effect I have before I come to a couple of counterpoints are the weather extremes. I mean, England in particular, not exactly known for its consistent weather, even on the same day in the same region, right? Like, it's just
you say
hot,
this, all
cold,
I can
hot,
think
cold.
of is the Canadian goal that took place, I think it was last weekend, where the guy did the bicycle kick in what I can describe as a extreme blizzard, which I'm sure you've probably seen.
Yeah.
But you're right. It probably is at least when it comes to playing conditions, definitely going to have an effect.
Yeah, and that in itself, especially like we're talking about the routines and stuff of getting these players to their maximum potential, but maximum potential also means maximum risk with your muscles, right? And if all of a sudden you're much colder than you're used to being or much warmer than you're meant to being, that also has an effect on the strain you're putting on the muscles, and that in itself can cause issues. And so all of these things come together, and that's why we're seeing so many injuries, right? And again, not just specifically Saints. I'm sure that all clubs, including Saints, have thought about all of these things and have certain ways to try and mitigate these factors. But with all of them in mind, it's no surprise. But to come to my counterpoints, without trying to sound too much like old man shouting at cloud, are injuries actually increasing, or are we just hearing more about them now? Right?
I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. It's the fact that you have to look at the size of squads now to be able to get if you lost 2 or 3 players to injury years ago, everyone would describe that as an injury crisis. Whereas now we'll have a giant squad, and we will say things like, "Our squad is too big. We need to trim the squad," and then we will have players in 3 positions, and then you'll be in the position we're in now, where we have no right backs. So I don't know if that's the case, but again, I think it's not that there are. It could be that there are. It feels like there are more injuries because there is more going on. There is more sport. There is more fixtures. So if you increase the amount of fixtures, you're going to increase the amount of injuries. Yeah. So it's still within a small time frame, right? It's still.
But also to add to that, also, injuries are going to be getting picked up more, right? Because we have more of this science. We can get things that identify these soft tissue injuries earlier. So actually, you're more likely to see a player more often missing 1 or 2 games with one of these injuries. But that's in place of, in the past, he would have played these games and then snapped a muscle 3 weeks down the line, right? So you're seeing more and more of it because more of these preventative measures and, data analysis and sports science are being brought into place to protect the players from the serious side of it. And that makes sense to me. I don't know if that's
No, I
that
agree.
resonates.
I think the only other point I think I've got to add, mate, that's you kind of briefly touched on was equipment, and like it's like boots and stuff. And like
Yeah.
you talked about like the cutting the socks thing that you hate, but I also can't help but remember, was it Cucurella who kept getting his studs caught in the ground, and then with like a new pair of boots that he had, so he just took them off and threw them in the bin. And that's that kind of stuff of making everything look fancy and fashionable is not exactly useful for a as you pointed out, actually playing the game.
Yeah, and look, I mean, these are all things that are getting investment from all over the place, right? Like, I dread to think how much of the global economy is spent on football boots. I mean, even if you take the snapshot of my household alone, between me, my son, and my daughter, we're looking at a solid percentage of household outgoings towards new football boots. It's not. It's not a minute expense. So these investments are happening as part of it. It's interesting when you think about all of the things that don't really go through your mind when you sit there and go, what do you mean you've got cramp after 70 minutes when you get paid 30 grand a week to run around a pitch? Like,
Well,
but
does
maybe
this
there's just a
mean
bit more to it.
does this mean you're going to go? You're going to go. You're going to feel a bit better and be a bit nicer to goalkeepers going forward now?
Absolutely not.
No? Good. Okay.
Right? Absolutely not, because I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that all of these environmental factors affect players like wing-backs who cover a lot of ground. What do you think the average distance covered by a goalkeeper is?
Well, I'm going to clip this up and you're going to upset a lot of people.
I'll stand by it.
Awesome.
The
Thank
most
you, mate.
protected position in all of football, and it's strongly taken advantage of. But yeah, anyway, that's it really. That's my little deep dive into injuries and muscle concerns. So
I really enjoyed it, mate. And it's interesting to think about because we're obviously the problem I think we've got is we talk about injuries, we can talk about how bad they are when we see them, and then we just jump to how annoying it is that like Shea Charles is out for 2 months, or this like Wellington's picked up an injury. This sucks because then he's picked up the same injury. He's got that reoccurring injury that keeps being a problem, as opposed to like actually examining the wider problem and wider context that this is happening in. And the fact that, the argument of is it actually getting worse or is it just that the technology is better to identify what is actually happening? Because again, a lot of people used to play through the pain, but then subsequently that would make it worse for them longer term. So yeah, it's
and I mean, I guess also one of the things I never even actually got round to talking about, but did write down at one of the points is like the changes in intensity, right? When you think about the style we had under Russell Martin and how different, not only like different levels of energy and different levels of intensity, but also just different groups of muscles and different mentalities that requires. Then switch that up to have to go to, especially down in the Championship where the game is so heavily based on transition and there are so many more of these like high intense transition plays. It's no wonder that, if you've had effectively a year off from that type of conditioning, it's not really a surprise that it should come back and affect us in the ways that it has, and as we've seen with so many players going out with similar injuries, right? Hamstrings, calves, it's all those parts of the body that you have high impact and high usage of when you're running, and that's why.
Thank you very much, mate. It's been really interesting to talk about, and thank you for doing lots of research for it.
Right, I love it. It's all part of the fun. Well, that's it. But yes, thank you anyway for joining me on my journey into injuries. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope that it has been insightful. I hope it gives you a fresh perspective to think about our injuries, and hopefully we can take it all into consideration and fix all of the injury problems and just have a team of super fit, super squads who can score all the goals. That's the long-term aim. Until football's just totally played by robots. Anyway, bringing it slightly back on track, let us know what do you think would be the number one fix that you could implement to change all of these injuries? Do you think there's anything that could be brought in to make it better? Let us know in the comments or on the socials. We're on all of them. We're on YouTube, X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, everywhere. Hit us up, let us know. We love hearing from you, and I can't wait to see some of the responses. We will be back tomorrow when we talk some more fun stuff about football. But until then, everyone, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you then.
Your daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.